Okay, fine. I'll go again. Shut up. This week, we are talking about whether or not businesses should take a position on social issues. And we are talking about why businesses shouldn't have their customers forced to call their Wi-Fi networks stinky. That's right. All right, Nick's with me in person. Let's get stuck in. All right, welcome to Insights as a Service. We're in the same place. Hello, Nick.
Hello. It's
Hello.
rare.
It is rare. We're in a little space where all of our germs are just together and the rest of the office is safe.
They are amalgamating into a super germ.
Who got who sick first? Don't know.
Not me.
No, not me. I think it was probably Marek.
Yeah, we'll blame Marek on that one.
Yeah, who a lot of you will not have met, but or heard of. He's new. But anyway, actually, let's start with that. Let's just start with the fact that everyone in the whole world's sick and doing business is hard right now.
Yeah, it genuinely is. Not just everyone's sick, but you've also got school holidays. You've got pilots cancelling flights, not pilots, but airlines due to staff shortages. The whole world, business travel, engaging with people is just really difficult at the moment.
It is. I think everything is delayed. All projects are delayed. It's hard to get from A to B. You found that the other day. You were flying down to Sydney?
Sydney from Coolangatta and ended up flying out of Brisbane the next day at 8:30 to get to a 9 a.m. meeting in Sydney.
That's punishing. I had my bag got lost between Gold Coast and Auckland. It was in Sydney that it got lost, but that took a day longer to arrive. First time in, I don't know, 15 years of traveling regularly that's happened to me.
Yeah.
And my friend, he was just flying from Christchurch to Dubai. He had his first flight cancelled because of COVID-related staff shortages and then had to have a 14-hour stopover in Sydney.
I'm 7 flights in to July or August, I guess, when this comes out. But in July, 7 flights in and 1 has been on time.
I actually read something today. It said that the Australian airports are the worst in the world for flight cancellations and delays at the moment.
Cancellations, definitely. But everyone was saying, get to Sydney Airport super early. Security is crazy. It's nuts. And maybe that's just international. But we were through Sydney domestic security in record time, faster than going through Wellington domestic airport.
That doesn't seem to be the issue here in Nauru. It's not like that the actual fundamentals of getting through security and all that stuff is the problem. It's just the fact there's no air crews.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just dropping like flies. I mean, we've just seen it in our own office, just the amount of people who day in, day out, even if it's not COVID now, and I think that's the thing, is like, if it's not COVID, it's just some horrible strain of flu or some other weird 18th century disease that we haven't had for ages.
Or just people being tired and just needing a kind of mental break.
That's probably true too, because the more other people are off, the more strain there is on the people that are still there.
Yeah.
Which, that's a really interesting point in itself, just burnout.
It compiles. And, back in New Zealand, unlike here where it's been sunny the last few days, it's just been weeks and weeks of rain and grim weather. And that definitely takes a massive mental health toll.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what it means for most of us, I think, is the people who aren't sick work harder, things take longer to do, projects are getting delayed, and there's just more cancellations, like the amount of meetings we've thought we were going to have. We're supposed to have a guest with us on the podcast today. Sick.
Same as yesterday. Sick.
So yeah, I guess just everyone who is dealing with that at the moment, running a business, particularly in tech, given that's who listens to this, I think, you have our sympathy and empathy. All right, well, that's enough for first world problems then. Although, no, yeah, it's definitely first world problem. That's okay. I was going to try and, sort of not take all of that, but yep, fair.
Think 12 months ago though, and 12 months ago we were Delta, couldn't fly anywhere, borders were shut again. So it's a privilege to be able to fly internationally and domestically with relative ease again. So,
that's true.
But put it in context.
True. But the other thing is everyone's excited about traveling and the amount of, we were talking about this with Harriet, weren't we, about the networking scene just opening back up. There's a million things to go to, but they're also just massive germ fests. Like we had a work event, I want to say 2 weeks ago, I'm losing track of time, but something like that.
Yeah.
The amount of people that were crook the following week from that, and it wasn't all COVID, there was just germs.
General sickness.
Yeah. It's a risk. And it's a calculated risk, I guess, but there's that genuine desire to reconnect with people almost at whatever cost.
And that point where businesses just need to move forward.
True.
They just can't keep their staff in bubbles anymore.
Yeah. Having said that, so we were almost starting to phrase it like when we were like our PNC team and just us as a management team, we were like, COVID's in the past now, so it's in the rearview mirror. We gotta get on with work, but it's really not.
No.
It's just it's here. It's here to stay. Almost it feels like, and we just have to kind of just take it on the chin and get on with it somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. And my experience over the last 3 weeks is Australia is very much in that it's the behind us category
Right.
comparative to New Zealand, which you still feel like it's in the community more. There's a lot more mask wearing.
Mm.
There's a lot more signs and posters and ads and things still up. So I think it definitely depends what country you're in, as to your experience currently with that.
Yeah, and I think yeah, it's an interesting space that there's some people who are just we're facing the same problem. There's this massive spike, and 2 years ago we shut up shop for this exact same thing,
Yeah.
basically. But now it's almost just politically so unpalatable that despite health experts saying you should be wearing a mask, the politicians are like, yeah, but I'd really like to get reelected, so maybe, maybe not. Yeah. All right. Well, before we get ourselves taken off Spotify, we better move on.
So probably a good segue into company positions on politics and social issues.
Oh, actually, good call. All right, let's talk about that. So, Kaseya bought Datto. A lot of our listeners will know that. We've got some people that are big Datto fans. I know a few of them. I've also met people that love what Kaseya do. I know some people that are on the advisory board for Kaseya in America as well. That's all good, but they're very different companies. Kaseya bought Datto. Have you, in your past life, as in working at an MSP, had much to do with Datto?
Not with Datto. So before they moved it up Autotask, I was a big Autotask shop, so that was quite cool. But I loved their product set, even from their very early days. And by early days, I'm talking 13.
So, what's his name? Vicola. I think I
Cola.
pronounced that right. Their CEO. So he sounds like an interesting guy. They had a town hall over in the US with all the Datto staff, and he basically got up and just swore his head off. And I don't think he handled the questions as well as he could have, but it was really clear there was this clash of cultures, right? There were these um, uh, people who are used to having a company that they could sort of sit behind with aligned values and felt that they were also given certain benefits and entitlements that made them feel, I guess part of a bigger purpose and very much on board. Kaseya has a firm rule, which is no position on any issue, period. Doesn't matter what it is. We're not for or against it. That's not our job. Our job is to provide tools to MSPs.
It's just a service, no standard, no comment.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he specifically brought out things like George Floyd, Pride Month. He just said, not for or against. We as a company have no stance on that. And so that just got me thinking, like, should companies take positions on social issues?
I think it depends on the industry that you're in. And if you really know your customer, you can have a position because it probably aligns with your giant customer base, and you're not going to bleed business by coming out and saying something contradictory to what your market wants. But I also think the other element in there is, your shareholders kind of expect you to now. They want to shop around for that. Do you have that climate perspective in your business? Are they not raging capitalists? Those kind of things all pop up now. And
But how do you, so in a really divided world, I mean, doesn't matter which democracy you go to, Australia is no different, New Zealand's no different, America's no different. You've got ballpark 55-45, 60-40 type split. So whatever position you take, you're almost guaranteed to piss off borderline half
Yeah.
of your market base.
yeah, I think you do. But again, you can't be going to the extremities. And I think that's the key. Is it needs to be a controlled message with a justification around it, rather than going, our position is this, no comment on the rest. It's the justification. Why is your position that? Because all our employees believe in net X, or we surveyed most of our customers, and they and our employees all believe in this. So that's where we stand as a company, and we want to take that forward.
That's fair. Yeah, if it's research driven and you've got your finger on the pulse of
Yeah.
what your clientele resonate with, and you want to further align with them and be a brand of choice for more than just price point or product, but also purpose, then that's fair. I think what really annoys a lot of people, and I'll just say annoys me, is when it doesn't come across as genuine. So
Yeah.
it's and I see a lot of that with things like Pride Month, or certain history months in the US, where it's, well, from this date to this date, we're going to change some logos, but it's almost like ticking a box rather than actually doing anything to back that
To
up.
help promote it or put
Yeah.
funding towards, awareness and all those kind of other
Hmm.
campaign avenues.
Yeah. But I just, yeah, so for me, that's not super genuine. It's disingenuous. And I think so an example of a, I guess, a social stance that works well, and often it starts because the company itself is going, we're building a company around this purpose,
Mm.
would be like, say, Zambreros, where each meal bought is a meal donated,
Yeah.
and you can see the clock ticking, or the ticker going up, number of meals provided. And I'd be surprised if anyone was against that, to be honest. I mean, it seems like a pretty reasonable thing to do, but it's a great example of a social cause and a business being entwined to the point that there's no distinction between the two.
And that's great. And I know there's a couple of companies in New Zealand that also do similar to that. But then you go to an event and then they market the event with having these lunches that do that thing. But is that to tick a box? Because it makes them, that's where you sometimes go, are you just doing that to attract more people to it, or
Right.
give that feel good value to it? And I think that is then when you have to go, well, what's the company hosting this event that's putting on this lunch? Do those values genuinely align with that? And sometimes you probably go, they're just ticking a box. But
Mm. But there's some causes, I suppose, that are just unambiguously good,
yeah,
giving food to people who
I
otherwise
need
are
it.
struggling for
Yeah.
that. So it's like, even if it's a little bit self-serving of this company to sort of hook us in with this, it's like, I'm happy to just let that ride, because, if it's a good fit for me anyway, I'm going to just, it's a good
Somewhere down the
outcome.
road, there will be a positive outcome from it regardless.
Yeah. But I think, going back to the recruitment piece though,
Mm.
like, there's a lot of millennials, a lot of younger people coming to the workplace that particularly in this record high or record low unemployment. I was going to say high employment. Either way, it works. Point is, there's a lot of people that can choose where they work at the moment, and those people want to feel something, part of something bigger. If you don't take a stance on anything, it's pretty bland. It's very vanilla. So what are you working towards?
There's a lot of, you know, you said millennials there before, but millennials are getting old now.
Mm.
Like it's really Gen X is what's coming into the workplace,
Yeah.
which makes me feel extra old
Mm.
at
Yeah.
this point. Suddenly realizing that.
I was just going to say, like, you're a millennial.
Yeah,
So
I'm a
yeah.
millennial. But yeah, it's 1996 and
Millennials are
after
81 onwards, aren't they?
81 to
Yeah,
96, I
because I
think.
just miss out, which annoys the shit out of me. But anyway, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and again, that's a whole different perspective of what people's beliefs and values are, but those are the ones that are coming into your business. Those are the decision makers of the future.
Mm,
Those are your future management teams. And making sure, you're getting the right people on the bus and in your business. You should have an answer to that as a company, I feel.
mm.
Otherwise, you're going to miss out on quality talent.
Because I suppose the other argument for businesses having some sort of a stance on social issues, and I think particularly climate change, or,
Mm.
or sustainability, maybe is a broader focus, is a lot of people feel like governments just aren't up to it. They're paralyzed by just ineptitude in many cases. So where governments fail, businesses lead. The problem with that is, do you want to have businesses framing, I guess, the conversations we have? There's a lot of powerful tech companies that, can determine what shows when we search things. Do you want to leave? I don't know. It's someone's got to lead the sustainability piece. It seems to be businesses at the moment, where some of the major economies aren't really
Yeah,
driving it.
and I
But
think it's great that business is driving that kind of element as well. Um, and more people are asking for that exact kind of information as well in RFPs,
mm,
in any kind of tender or response. You do have to go in going, I need an answer to that. I need to
mm,
know, what the gender split is across staff. I need to know how many Indigenous people I've employed. I need to know what my company's position is on sustainability and to have answers to that. But the sad thing, I think, is with inflation, with a lot more pressure on businesses at the moment, how much of that stuff where in the last 3 or 4 years they've maybe done a lot of work towards sustainability, they've self-funded that out of their pockets, and are we going to see that contract and some of these kind of good values and these nice to haves drop off as a result?
that's true. I think your what's important to your business, what are your core values, are tested in times of
Mm.
recession, when um, Yeah, that is actually gonna be really interesting to see what sort of changes around the edges. But I think going right back to Kaseya and Datto, right? There's a real cost to mergers and acquisitions if there's not cultural alignment,
Yeah,
because whatever you think you're buying is ultimately founded on its people. And if those people aren't really digging what you're all about, you're going to lose a lot of them.
yeah,
You're going to get a lot of pushback. There's a lot of places people can get pretty vocal about your business. And I imagine that, a lot of people chose Datto for a specific reason as customers as well. So you, there's a real risk of diminished value in what you've acquired
yeah.
if you're not aligned. So, yeah, it seems like that wasn't factored in at all in this one. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess to wrap that up, to when it comes to values, they have to be genuine. It works better when the company was founded around whatever value or social issue you're espousing. And yeah, I don't know. It's going to be harder to attract staff. I do think that is part of it. People want to be part of something bigger than just a paycheck.
Yeah.
So I think there is value in it. But yeah, it's a really interesting space. So I'll leave it there. All right. I was actually going to talk about 5G spectrum in New Zealand, which is kind of a boring subject, but the key thing there is that the New Zealand government hasn't yet set plans to do a 5G spectrum auction, but they're probably going to have to. Australia did it. They made about 700 million by doing it. There is some talk. There was a piece in the Herald by Chris Keel in New Zealand that talked about how the satellite providers, primarily Starlink, are basically paying about $7,000 a year to use the millimeter wave spectrum they have access to. Not sure how much they use. Don't know enough about it. But off the back of that, you had a story about Starlink, and we should talk about that because it's more funny.
It's
and
way funnier. So we always like to follow, kind of the community groups and user forums and things like that, and kind of see what's going on in the world of tech. And there's this great one there that kind of ties on from the real bad weather that's been happening in New Zealand lately. And so bad weather in New Zealand, you live rurally, you're probably going to rely a lot on solar, but there's also the probability of having power cuts is a bit higher, and the restoration time to get those sorted can take a while. So
especially in New Zealand's weather's been pus lately, right?
absolute plus.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, going back to that, so there's this Starlink user. They had a power cut. Their router's been rebooted. It's come back up online, but they can't get onto the internet, and they're trying to work out what's going on. They're not seeing their usual Wi-Fi network displaying, and they're going, "What's going on? There must be a bug somewhere." So they go out, they take the dish down, they put the dish back up, they dig up the cable that's been run, put that back in. It's still going wrong. Start kind of working on their 4G to work out what's going right. And it turns out that Starlink, in an effort to get people to change the Wi-Fi names on their routers, set the default to change to Stinky, but it only comes into effect when your router reboots. So obviously, not being prepared for that, power cut took out the router. That rebooted. They got this new Wi-Fi network now. They can't get on. No customer communications about it.
Ugh.
It's just a recipe for just.
What was the
having
driver to
pissed
get
off
people to
people.
change their Wi-Fi password? Wi-Fi SSID, I guess.
I have no idea, but if you think about where they're going to be used, like surely they're not exactly next to each other, so
Yeah,
it must be pretty obvious. So I don't know what the underlying driver was to move people to do that, but to change it to something silly like Stinky, I don't think how many people roll out the bog standard Huawei router for residential customers of fiber, and they all have, boring name -5N,
Yeah.
or something generic like that, and people just roll with it. Looking in any
Yeah.
kind of apartment building, it doesn't have to be super unique and cool. People just have it connect once and deal with it. It's not
Yeah. That seems weird to
a
me.
set and forget kind of mentality around Wi-Fi these days.
I'd love to know if anyone else is listening that has a Starlink connection, whether they've also had their, well, I guess again would have to reset to take effect, but maybe give it a reset and see if it changes to Stinky. That makes me think of the best Wi-Fi names or network names I've heard of. Have you heard any good ones you can remember?
Oh, pretty fly for a Wi-Fi.
That's the best, hands down, hands down. Where were we, Remain? Where we found there was a Wi-Fi like SSID thing, and it was a massive amount of swear words in French. Ah, right. We were doing like a marketing shoot to get some sort of unique imagery for our website, and yeah, the Wi-Fi at the place we're at was fairly obscene French language. It was kind of weird.
But yeah, it's a time back to that Starlink one though. It's absolutely key though, because that user took him a long time to work out that, and then you can't beat having good local support, someone to actually call and go, what's happened with my router? And they go, oh, sorry, we forgot to actually communicate that to you. But yeah, here it is. So yeah, always, it comes into your purchasing decisions as support.
Yeah, that's fair. Oh, so yeah, Starlink, changing up some Wi-Fi names, and also probably going to be part of a bigger conversation around spectrum purchasing if there is an auction in New Zealand. Just back to that too, if the government does choose to go with a spectrum auction where the telcos have to pay a truckload of money for the, was it 3.5 gigahertz, I think, in the 26 gigahertz bands, it's like that's going to have to be passed on in a period of high inflation. Ouch. If they don't, I mean, it's 700 million roughly, maybe, that won't go, onto the bottom line, which is also kind of ouch, bit of a no-win situation. But I think essentially the telcos in New Zealand with mobile networks and some of the fixed wireless operators, the likes of Lightwire, I'm not sure we've actually had too much to say in this space, but I know the Wireless Internet Service Providers Association of New Zealand has, sorry? Whisper. Yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. No one knows what Whisper is if I don't spell it out. So, they are getting pretty vocal about the fact that it doesn't make sense for some internet providers to have to pay quite significant amounts while satellite providers for some reason aren't. The potential counter to that is Starlink with a rural focus, and perhaps the wireless fixed wireless providers fulfilling more of a social sort of a social connectivity play where they're filling a space that isn't provided by the big guys, and there should be some sort of offset in terms of access to 5G spectrum as a result.
Without any kind of formalized rebate, I guess.
Yeah.
On that, it's an overlooked one there. But the other thing that just jumped into my head really quickly was that the trend in telco is for selling your assets off into another company and then getting some private equity firm to come and buy them. I wonder if we'll see spectrum allocation go that same way and ultimately lead to a far more open MVNO based of operations down the road. I don't know. I think there's something in that.
Yeah, even in New Zealand back in the day when we're looking at the whole UFB structure where there were the providers around the place, I was a fan of the idea of a Chorus-esque wholesale only entity acquiring the spectrum and doing basically what you say to ensure fair and sort of ubiquitous access to the bands that were needed to get the right mobile data options to the right places. So I think that there is something in that.
Yeah, I think we'll see that evolve over the next decade.
Yeah, I was going to say as well that MyRepublic today announced that they've struck up that MVNO deal with Vodafone with an unlimited only option. Their financials that were reported in, was it CRN? Who was that reported?
I think it was CRN. Yeah.
CRN, yeah. Did not look like they're operating off particularly thick margins, to say the least. In fact, I think without some
strong FX movements.
Yeah, without some strong FX movements, they would have had 2 consecutive years of relatively significant losses off the base of less than 30 mil. But anyway, it seems that they've found a way, I assume, to make some money off an MVNO agreement with Vodafone. So that's relatively unusual in the New Zealand market. There's Vocus for years before buying 2 Degrees, Orcon New Zealand, as they ended up being. They struggled to get any headway under an MVNO agreement.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and the other big players from the MVNO space is obviously Spark, and that's pretty niche still in terms of its adoption within the smaller telcos. But 2 Degrees was that winner from that. So maybe Vodafone's trying to pull more people in at the moment.
Maybe. Yeah. Oh well, we'll see. Now the only other couple of things I had to talk about. One, just really quickly, we've been talking heaps about Zero Trust ever since I came back from the Zscaler conference, and we had Misaki join us recently to talk about all things Zero Trust. But I just heard a relatively good, I guess, analogy for Zero Trust and what it means. So the analogy goes something like this. You go into an office and you go to the front desk and you're given a card, you're signed in. And from that point, they say, hey, your meeting with whoever is in room 22, and they just wave you off. And you can wander through that office and potentially even go to a connecting office and do whatever you want to do, including go into room 22, come back, give them back your card, leave. It's that lateral spread, right? It's that once you're in, you can really go wherever you want because you're trusted once you're in. as opposed to zero trust being you go to the front desk, they say, cool, sign in, here's your card. Now here's the security person that's going to guide you to room 22, stay with you until you leave 22, and then walk you back to the desk, and then you leave. So there's no lateral spread. You're not trusted really at any point. You're in, but you can't go wherever you want. You're still not trusted once you're in. And that to me kind of explains it. It really is just a guided access.
Yeah, that is absolutely the best analogy I've heard of it so far.
Yay, look at me go. Cool. Also, look at Jay Chadri go. I just heard him say it. Anywho, thought I'd pass that on so that it all makes more sense. The other thing was that NBN is looking to renegotiate a special access undertaking with what I assume is the ACCC, basically the Australian government. And while I don't have all the details top of my head, definitely got COVID brain, but it was essentially an inflation plus X type pricing model going forward. And it just aligns with what we've seen in New Zealand, where all of the regulated bodies have an inflation or CPI related ability to increase prices. You know better than me. What have we seen out of the three major carriers?
The largest been about 5.9%.
How long ago was that issued?
So that was announced back in early June.
Was it Chorus?
Chorus, yeah, coming into effect in 1 October. So not too far away. But again, in New Zealand, they're regulated to CPI only, not CPI plus X.
Okay.
And the plus X is, I think, what's the real scary part about the NBN's proposal. Because how big is X and what's the justification for it?
It's probably well documented within their submission, but I don't have it handy. But I think the key thing is that whatever they've submitted, Telstra hates because they came out all guns blazing end of last week, start of this week. But either way, basically saying mismanaged, poorly structured, they need to find additional revenue is not our problem.
Every issue that they've had over the last few years.
Yeah. And, Comms Day, I was listening to their podcast, good podcast. If anyone wants to find another industry one to listen to, Comms Day Live with Graham Lynch. He was saying and making the point that NBN's just managed to raise, I think, a couple of $1 billion because they're government backed. They've got a near sovereign nation status of debt rating, and I think it's AA. And they have a competitive advantage just from that against, private market operators.
Yeah.
So, public entities, whatever. But the point is non-government backed entities. So yeah, you can see why Telstra starts to get a bit annoyed with the advantages and are pushing back hard on this updated special access undertaking submission.
Rightly so. I mean, I know we're a bit hard on Telstra sometimes in this podcast, but good on them this time, I think.
Yeah, pushing back. And you were making the point to me too, right? That I guess particularly with the New Zealand market, if your only ability to increase price points is related to CPI,
you're going to take the maximum for as long as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you can't really begrudge that because CPI isn't some made up number. The costs underlying their ability to provide the service, wage inflation is a real thing. We all know that. Yep. So I get it. At the moment, have we seen much movement in the New Zealand market from other ISPs in terms of pricing? Or have they not come into effect yet?
I think some have just come into effect, some are later. But not to that extremity. Most have gone to 5.9, which is kind of what it was back then when they were all assessing it. Some of it settled for a little bit lower actually, which was nice. But again, they've taken that interpretation and not gone blanket 5.x over the whole product suite. Some have gone, actually, we revised that price point last year. We're going to hold that. We're going to do that for this product and that product. So it's not just a one size fits all model. And that is actually quite nice. And that has a bit more parity in it. And that's why you don't see so much market pushback in New Zealand as well.
Okay, cool. All right. Anything else you want to talk about before we take our snot-riddled faces away? And
no, let's go grab a commuter train.
Yeah, we are actually off. Well, I'm off to the airport, so we'll see how that pans out for me. Thanks, Nick. Nice to catch up in person again for another podcast. Second time. It does flow better, I got to say, when you're in the same spot. And let's catch up again in a couple of weeks.